Good afternoon. It's 6 minutes past 12. The Mannin Line in session through till 1 today. Today, the Environment, Food and Agriculture Minister, Geoffrey Boot, is with us. You can text, you can email, and you can call. Text 166177. Email studio@manxradio.com. Text 166177. Call 66 1368. Just a quick run through the COVID numbers. 18,834 tests have been taken. 18,819 concluded. 15 people waiting for results. 42 people waiting tests at the moment. And we have just one active case on the Isle of Man. It's an isolated individual, non-community case. So, Geoffrey Boot, good afternoon, Mr. Boot.
Faster Mai.
Well, what a year it's been. I'll just ask you very briefly, in the ministry, the Environment, Food and Agriculture Minister, what effect has COVID had?
Well, I'll answer your question a little earlier. I'm looking forward to the days getting longer.
Yes.
Yes, and you're right. It's been a really bizarre, strange year. Who could believe that we would, in March, remove public freedoms and rights that have been with us for years in obviously a good cause, save life and protect the island. But from my department's point of view, we've been quite badly affected, or the people that we serve have. The fishing industry lost its markets almost overnight, which obviously was very concerning. The agricultural product side, on Ireland there was still a market, but with restaurants closed and access to other countries restricted, that posed big problems for us. And then looking at the lockdown situation, our health and safety team, we're working with public health and environmental health, our planning department, repurposing businesses so they could do takeaway in breach of their planning consents, as it were, but we've tried to facilitate this to help people remain in business and service the community. And latterly, we've been heavily involved in contact tracing, and obviously at the moment things are going well. The island is almost COVID-free. I say almost because we get the odd case, but they're not in the community. They're normally as a result of travel. So we're in a good place. When I speak to my opposite numbers and relatives in the UK, where they're still in virtual lockdown, we're in a good position to enjoy Christmas.
In regards to fishing, what's the situation? Because obviously there's another sword of Damocles about to descend, and that being Brexit as well.
Well, Brexit seems to have been forgotten to a certain extent because of the pandemic, and I guess that's the way things work. But Brexit has been going on, and my department particularly is in the midst of that, because we're affected more than perhaps any of the other departments in government. The fishing industry at the moment is waiting with bated breath, as indeed we are, as to what the outcome of the Brexit negotiations will be. I'm hoping that at the very least we'll maintain the status quo, because we need access to those European markets. They're extremely important for our fishing product, scallops particularly, but also shellfish, whelks. And if we can see an improvement in that position in terms of quota going forward, so that we can recapture some of the quota we lost in the past, that would also be a useful adjunct to the whole situation.
When will we know?
How long is a piece
January the 1st at least.
String, yeah. We keep hearing that it's going to be imminent. I can say that from a department and government point of view, we are in constant contact with the UK, but at the end of the day, we know as much as you do in real terms from the news.
So as we stand at the moment, the scallops, any shellfish that we had could go to Europe under the existing agreement.
No, that's patently not the case. We have a licensing regime, and vessels that fish in our waters have historic record and an ability to have a license to fish in our waters. That involves vessels from Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland, and with the UK generally, as well as Belgium and France. Fortunately, I would say that not many vessels come, or very few, if any, come from Europe as such, apart from around the Irish Sea. In terms going forward, the scallop situation will remain the same, or we hope it will. It's a difficult position because we control our territorial sea, but we're part of the UK in terms of fishing quota, etc.
The point I was making was any scallops that were landed by Manx boats previously could be exported, couldn't they?
Oh, sorry, I misinterpreted what you were saying.
Yeah.
Yes. In fact, the majority of the scallops that we land...
Oh, they were delicacies in Paris, weren't they?
Yeah, they go to France particularly, but also other parts of Europe.
So what has to happen for that to continue?
Well, a trade agreement with the EU would be a good precursor to that trade continuing tariff-free. But if we have to revert back to World Trade Organization rules and tariffs, then there will be a tariff scenario. And at the moment, it would appear that around 8% tariff on scallop exports.
Okay, let's go to our first caller now. Robin is on the line. Good afternoon, Robin. You're live with Geoffrey Boot, MHK.
Good afternoon, Minister. I'm just inquiring if you're aware of the wallaby infestation on the Isle of Man.
Robin, some people would call it an infestation. Other people might call it a useful and pleasant addition to our wildlife. There are obviously diverse views on this.
What do you call it, Robin?
These critters are destroying the flora and fauna and having an impact on certain species that are home to our island. And we're being overrun, infested with these. They're a menace, they're rodents, and I'm just wondering what the Minister is going to do about it.
Robin, the Minister is not going to do anything about it at the moment. I'm sorry to inform you. We have had discussions and we've had reports done on what the wallabies mean to various parts of the ecology on the Isle of Man. And they are now sort of established as part of our fauna and flora, although they are an alien species. Some people would like to see them controlled, and in fact, if people wish to control them on their own land, there is no impediment to humanely disposing of the animals, but as they're feral and not native to the Isle of Man. But I think the majority of people that I deal with like the wallabies, and if you look at the hospice last year with their wallaby fundraising campaign, it was surprising how much support the wallabies got as a result of that.
What's your view, Robin?
Well, my view, I mean, we're not dealing with cuddly koala bears here. We're dealing with a species that is tearing the countryside apart. And I would suggest that Mr. Boot perhaps creates a shooting party and goes out and blasts the blighters.
Why particular? What do they do then? Because people in the south of the island will just see the wallabies occasionally and think they're just cuddly creatures. Occasionally they leap out in front of cars. What damage are they doing, Robin?
Take a look at the Sulby claddocks and just look at the degradation of just everything, really. They are just eating everything possible. The hen harriers are moving elsewhere. It's something that I'd say Mr. Boot has got to take stern action and deal with. And I know he's a hunting type, and maybe he could do the island a service.
Okay, Robin, how many wallabies are there?
It's not a quantified amount, but we believe there are probably 400 or 500 distributed around the island, mainly obviously around the wildlife park. That's where they emanated from, and they have spread out. I've seen one on my land. And
500?
Maybe. No confirmed amount. We don't count them, but there are quite a few.
And exponentially growing, obviously.
Well, they obviously do breed. There are some that are controlled that I know of, but I guess in time they will continue to spread. I'm not sure that they are devastating to the environment. They do obviously inflict some ecological damage.
Are they a predator?
No, they're not a predator. They're a herbivore, and they eat plant life, and obviously in certain habitats compete with other animals. But they're not dangerous. They are obviously competing in some situations. And we have had some studies carried out, and there is some impact, but it's not that great.
Okay, Robin, thank you. Betty, you're live with Geoffrey Boot, MHK.
Hi, Minister. I was just wondering about if the deal with the EU goes through. There have been clauses put in the exit bill that say that fishing in Manx and Channel Island waters can be allowed. Other jurisdictions can be allowed to fish in those waters in some circumstances. And I wondered if that concerns you and what you're going to do about it.
Well, Betty, first of all, we don't know what the deal will be, and we've been fighting hard to make sure that our present situation it remains in the very least, and maybe some improvement on that depending on how the UK negotiate with the EU. At the end of the day, certain vessels from outside of the Isle of Man do have historic access to our waters, but we should never forget that we also have historic access to waters outside of the Isle of Man. And so we need to be careful that we don't just close everything down and call Manx waters for Manx vessels, because sometime in the future, if quota changes or the requirements for different types of fish change, then we may need access to waters outside of our territorial sea. So there's a give and take, but we are certainly not in a position where we're giving more fishing rights away. And we recently formed a new licensing regime that will ensure that in future any vessels coming from outside of our waters are licensed to fish in our waters, even if they have, as they do at the moment, have historic rights to fish, and most of those vessels are at present licensed as well.
Well, this license you mention, who gives the license? Is it the Isle of Man or is it England?
Vessels that fish in our waters will hold a UK licence, but they will also have to hold a Manx-issued licence as well. Because
I am concerned that this is a sop that Britain has thrown to the EU to enable the deal to go through.
Well, we don't know what the deal is likely to be, or if there will.
No, we don't know yet.
And so it's very difficult. Obviously, we are aware that fishing is a contentious issue with the French, and I suspect that the UK in their negotiations are not going to allow anything more than happens at the moment, and I suspect it will be somewhat less in terms of access. So I think we'll be on the right side of that deal.
I hope so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Betty. Good to talk to you today. Geoffrey Boot, MHK, is with us, the Minister for Environment, Food and Agriculture. Fishing is part of it, but also arboricultural. The forestry is part of your domain, as it were. What's the situation with disease? We had a question come in on the text about disease in trees on the island.
Well, I think it's fairly obvious that we've had problems over the near past. We've got Dutch elm disease, which we're trying our best to control. In fact, we're holding that back. A lot of our mature trees are elm, and it would be a great shame to lose those. And our culling program will continue. We've had Phytophthora, which has affected larch trees particularly, and there's large areas in our plantations where we're taking out trees that have been affected, and that's ongoing. And recently we've contracted ash dieback, which is a great cause for concern. No doubt people will have seen in our hedgerows and around the countryside ash trees that are looking very poorly, losing their leaves early, and this is ash dieback. And sadly, the prediction is that we may lose 80-90% of our ash trees over the next few years, which not only causes problems in terms of they line our highways and they can be a danger, but it will fundamentally change the appearance of our countryside.
Are we winning the fight?
There is no fight against ash dieback. There's no control measures. Trees either recover or stagger on, or they die, and if they die, they are removed.
Let's also talk about planning, because you're fairly well involved in that as well. What's the most contentious thing at the moment in planning on the island?
There's a number of issues. Planning is always contentious. I think it would be imprudent as de facto head of planning for me to comment directly on specific applications. But planning by its very nature is an adversarial situation where there are winners and losers. And small applications can create big public outcry or comment, and larger applications are equally able to do the same.
A lot going on in Peel, and Peel just continues to grow and grow and grow. Am I right in saying, it's probably the fastest growing part of the Isle of Man?
Well, it was, and obviously we're in a situation where there will be a north and west area plan in process soon, which will look at the future of Peel in terms of commercial and residential development. Obviously, it's part of my constituency. We have a lot of new houses in Peel. It would be nice to see more commercial development so that there are employment opportunities in the town or around the town. But whether Peel has grown as much as it can at the moment is something for the local plan and going forward.
Obviously, being a Peel and Glenfaber MHK and being somebody in charge of planning, how do you compartmentalise your views and your responsibilities?
Well, from a constituency point of view, I normally absolve myself from the decision-making process when it comes to planning. Obviously, I have constituency views and I can represent those views, but I have to be careful because there is a conflict there, and detaching myself and explaining to constituents that sometimes it would be imprudent of me to comment on certain applications because of my position. Fortunately, there are two MHKs in Peel, and Mr. Harmer is well capable of representing people's views in terms of planning, etc., without that conflict.
A note in from Gary who says, has Mr. Boot found any ground for the bikes to ride to replace the closed Snuff the Wind site?
We are looking at a site at the moment, and we're working with the organisations involved. It's not a quick fix, but in the longer term, I'm sure there will be a solution.
We're streaming live on Facebook, streaming live on YouTube as well with Geoffrey Boot, MHK. Big portfolio, including moving 500,000 queen scallops. How do you move 500,000 queen scallops, and why?
Well, we've got a cable being laid through the south of the island in our territorial sea, and it goes right through the chickens area, which is a prime scallop bed. Consequently, to ameliorate the damage to the scallop bed, we reached an agreement with the cable layers that they would fish out the scallops in the path of the cable, and they have removed something like 500,000 scallops and relocated them. So that's a great bit of good news.
Still alive, are they?
I hope so, yes. Scallops, they've been fished live, and they are being relocated.
And this is a marine, it's a fibre optic cable that's coming ashore. Is it Port Greenock it's coming ashore, and Port Erin, I think?
I'm not familiar with the detail of the cable, but I do know it's an interconnector between Ireland and the UK. So, yes, it's an important bit of infrastructure.
Well, that's how you do that. How on earth? Well, I'm sure they know exactly how to move 500,000 queen scallops as well. The department's always pushing outdoor pursuits, says John, on the Isle of Man, as they're great for our physical and mental health. But why are the department's glens, public footpaths and greenways in such bad repair and poorly signposted? And in this day and age, why isn't there an app where we can follow the walks by GPS?
Starting with the signposting, we are trying to address that issue, and we're working on a programme of re-signposting in common with DOI and other departments, so there's common signage around the island. I would challenge that the glens are in poor condition. There are some where there could be improvements, but the majority of glens have satisfactory and safe walking areas, and we are expanding car parks and facilities so that people have more access. Obviously, there's a certain amount of money to be spent and restrictions on that. in terms of what we can spend on the glens, but from my perspective, the more public access we can afford and the better it is. You are absolutely right. Great for the island's health and also showcasing our island and our biosphere status.
26 minutes past 12, live today on the Mannin Line, the Minister of Environment, Food and Agriculture, Geoffrey Boot, MHK. Now, if you want to get in touch with Mr. Boot, you can text 166 177, email studio@manxradio.com or call 66 13 68. We've had lots and lots of response to Robin and the Wallabies. I think most people want to keep the Wallabies.
Spreading that